Hi guys, welcome back to the Scrap Zone. I'm Julie, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create 3 simple cards using one stamp set. So let's get started. First, we're going to be using this really cute stamp set here to create our 3 cards. I've gone ahead and I've cut my bases, and I've got 2 card fronts. I'm only using cardstock here, so this is just French vanilla cardstock, and I'm going to pull out these 3 beautiful stamp sets. Now, this is how it all started with the month of January. I just couldn't put them away just yet, so I wanted to create a few cards, and I've created one simple card using the fancy borders. The second one is using a stencil, and this one here is just using the borders that are within that stamp set. So you see down here you've got beautiful titles, beautiful borders, and really nice images that you can color. So these images are repeating themselves from one month to the next. So I just thought that it would be kind of fun to have a stash of cards ready to go. I didn't stamp on the inside because, you know, some of these can easily be turned into birthday cards or just well wishes. So let's go through a few of the supplies I've used to create these cards. So this first card right here, I pulled out my fancy borders, and I'm going to use it throughout the year. So the plan is to make 3 cards for every month, and then I'm just going to show you a video once every 3 months. So you'll see a few of these coming your way throughout the year. This second card right here, I created myself a stencil with my Cricut machine, and I've linked the Cricut Design Space file down below. You can grab it, and I'm bringing in these stitch brackets. I found that they were really pretty and they were the perfect size. And lastly here, this is done with the stamp. And of course, I brought in a tiny little bracket, and I did pull one of these larger stencils from close to my heart because the spacing was perfect for what I was trying to achieve. So let's dive in and let's create card number 1 with the month of March stamp. So I think I'm going to use this border right here. I've gone ahead and I've cut all of my card bases, and I've cut a few fronts. So this is 4 inches by 5 1/4, and here I'm using, it's just post-it removable tape. So I'm going to put one on the right side and one on the left side. So the one on the right side goes in like half an inch, and this one here goes in 1.5 inches. And it's just, I'm just trying to make myself a nice clean edge. So I will be using this blender brush here, and I really like how soft this is. I tend to have a heavy hand when I do blending, so this is really good for me. So I did speed up this part quite a bit, and I wish I could blend this fast, but no, I cannot. One thing you have to be mindful of is that when you're mixing your colors with these little blender brushes, always start with your lightest shade and then move along all the way up to your darkest shade. So I've gone here and I've used Sage Fern and New England Ivy. Now, when I was doing the blending, I felt that it wasn't really blending enough, but when you're using dye-based inks, you just have to let it dry a little bit, and you'll see when I'm done, the blending is really, really nice. The other thing that's really good about these little brushes is that you can just kind of clean them on a microfiber cloth, and even though it's stained, it won't like contaminate the colors, but I'm trying to keep one brush per color family if you want. So anyways, this worked out quite well for me. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to pull a sentiment, and I'm going to just kind of position it right at the top of that blending strip. And then I'm going to bring in my little fancy borders, and I'm going to cut those out. Now off camera, I've cut those out, and I did stamp my sentiment using New England Ivy, and I really like that detail. That little stitch detail is really, really nice. So one thing you have to make sure, because I did cut this at 5 1/4, just make sure that you're giving yourself enough space between those two cuts that we just did using the border. So I kind of trimmed off another 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to start putting this on the card base. I'm going to go ahead here and just kind of use my bone folder and score this on the score line. And I'm going to start assembling my card. So I thought that it needed a little bit of dimension, and this is a quick and easy way to give some oomph to your cards. Oh, I didn't get the right scissors here. So the black tip scissors work best when you're cutting 3D foam tape. So I'm just going to go ahead here and add 3D foam tape on the entire surface. So I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces. So for the top piece, the center piece, and then the bottom piece. I don't know about you guys, but when I clean up my craft room, sometimes I come up with the cutest little cards, and these were some of them. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to add my top piece at the bottom, and then I'm going to follow through with the bottom piece, and then I'm going to put this right in the middle just to make sure that I'm giving myself enough spacing between those 2 cuts. That looks pretty good. And now that my ink is drying, you can tell that it's also blending, or the blend looks better. So I'm going to pull this stamp set again. I'm going to look for different images. I wasn't ready for butterflies because it's not that kind of weather around here. That little kite would have been cute in hindsight, but I would have had to have stamped that before putting it on my base. So I had this bag here of embellishments, and they kind of match. See that little flower? They match exactly the stamp set. So it's from the Hillside collection. So I thought, oh, you know what? We'll add something different to this card here. And I've pulled out here my little sequins, and when you pick those iridescent one, they match exactly the color that you're putting them on. So the one on the left side picks up all on the blues, and then the one that I'm working on now picks up on the greens. So I think that that's pretty cute. So there is card number 1, ready to go. So card number 2 is that little stencil that I told you that I created in Cricut Design Space. You can use any stencil that you have on hand, but you need something that has a small enough pattern to do this card. So I'm going to pop that right on top, and I'm going to use here washi tape, and I'm using quite a bit. You'll see that I'm using long strips, and it's only because I'm doing a video and I don't want this to kind of fly off as I'm trying to show you how to do this. So I'm going to go right ahead and do it across and on all sides. I end up using it again and again, so it's not that much of a waste. So we're going to start again with the blending of the lightest color on the outer edges of that card. So you can see that when you start, it is very, very light. And I'm just going around here, and it looks like I'm pressing hard, but I'm not pressing hard at all. And it just takes a little bit to do a really nice blend with dye-based ink. And I don't know, if this was an oxide ink, it would probably go a lot faster, but I wanted to try and blend with some of the inks that I already have. So I think that that's looking pretty good, and you can tell that it's got that nice green all around the card. So I'm going to move along to the fern ink, and I wasn't too sure about that either, because when I started blending that, it's got quite a bit of a yellow undertone, but it still looks really, really good. You'll see at the end when it's all nice and dry. That little bracket is going to sit right in that center. If you can see here, every time I'm bringing my blend onto my card front, I'm starting off on the side, and then I'm just kind of bringing it over onto the card. So I think that that looks pretty good. So we're going to pull off those little washi tapes here, and I did put quite a bit of them, but it did help hold everything down. Isn't that beautiful? I love the blend. I love the way that this turned out, and they look awesome with all of the colors. I think that this is my favorite card to make. It's simple. It's just cardstock and ink and one stamp set, but it is really, really cute. So of course, because I did pick the Lucky Charm image, I'm going to use gold thread, because, you know, the pot of gold. Well, that's what I was thinking anyways. So I'm going to remove the little kinks off of that piece of thread, and then I'm just going to add it to my card. So first thing here is that I want to cut that little bracket. So I'm just going to position it right here, and I'm just going to make sure that those two tips of the brackets are aligned, and I'm going to cut that down. I don't know, but when you cut something off to the edge, it just gives it a really nice look. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to add my dimensional foam right at the back. I like to cover the entire surface with my dimensional foam, but you can do smaller pieces if you wish. It's just something that I like to do. So I'm going to curl or loop my little thread around my fingers. I'm going to trim off the extra little pieces, and then I'm just going to pull back on the 3D foam tape, and I'm just going to tack that down. And I really like this technique because you can kind of fuss with your little loops, and then when you pop it right down, everything is nice and exactly where you want it. So we're going to add that little image, and I did use thin 3D foam tape to pop that up a little bit more, and I'm going to stamp this little image right at the bottom of the card. And yeah, it was a little bit nerve-wracking because my card's already done, right? So I did stamp that with New England Ivy, and I'm going to add a few of those gold sequins, and this card is done. I really like the blend. I really like the way that that turned out. So you've got it here in the month of February and here for the month of January. So I think it's still my favorite card out of all three. So let's finish card number 3. So this one here is actually fun to make because you're using the stamp set and you're creating your own image. So I'm going to put that larger stencil right at the corner of my card front, and I'm going to start blending. And this one here I decided, because it's going to be kind of like a pattern paper if you want, I'm using the lightest shade. And I did start going kind of up and down in those little creases, and then I went really light-handed in a little bit of a circular motion, but you have to be careful because those little strips are wide and it can actually buckle if you press down too hard. So I'm going to pull that little border. All of the stamp set have these cute little borders, so this is going to be fun to make cards all year long. I'm going to season my stamp, and I thought I wanted to use fern and I wasn't sure, so I'm just going to pull out a scratch piece of paper here and I'm going to test it out. And it's okay, you know, if you want to test things before you're kind of committing. So this here was just a little bit too dark. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to stick with the original plan. And the original plan is, let's make it monochromatic. Let's use the same color. And you can tell right on my sample here, or my little scratch piece of paper, that it's going to look really great. So I'm going to use my little foam for these little butterflies, and I'm going to stamp right in that white space. So I kind of had to get my head right over there, so sorry about that. But as you can see, they stamp perfectly. So they just fit exactly in that little white space. So I really like the way that this turned out. It kind of creates your own paper. And because you're using these clear stamps, you can line them up very easily. Kind of have to get my head in the shot again. Sorry about that. It's a lot easier when you can work right over your work as opposed to kind of at a distance when you're making a video, but I think you get the idea here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the background of my stamp. And even though they're little green butterflies, I think that it still looks quite cute. So one more up here, and that is done. And then I'm going to pull one of those little words. And the word that I pulled here, I think it's sunshine, because we're wanting some sunshine up here anyways. And here I'm going to go with the darker shade. So I did pull out the New England Ivy, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp on the colored portion that we did with the stenciling. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit and show you that I'm just lining up that little image, and I'm adding that little word all the way across those little bars, I guess, that we did when we were doing the blending. So that looks pretty good, and we're all done. I'm just gonna put my stamps away because I tend to make a bit of a mess if I don't. So the next step here is I decided to color in those little flowers, and I did stamp that using intense black ink. I will list all of the colors that I've used here in the description box down below, but as you can see here, I'm just adding just a simple coloring. I'm using the lightest shade, and then I'm doing a little bit of shadows, but not too much, with the medium shade just at the bottoms of the leaves here. And I'm just going to go ahead and do a really simple kind of coloring. So I start with the lightest shade, and then I add a little bit of shadows with the medium, and I blend the two together. But as I'm coloring here, I'm just wondering, do you guys ever feel like you're putting a stamp away too quickly? So this is what happened with these cards. I'm working on another project using these stamp sets, and I just felt that I wanted to use more of the images because they are so darn cute. So this is what happens when I clean up my scrapbooking room and I just decide that, you know what, I'm not quite done with you yet. And I'm really happy that I started making these cards. Now I do realize that they're past the month in which I'm creating them in, but next year I'm going to have 3 cards for every month, and some of them are going to be turned into birthday cards, and again, just well wishes. So let's finish this card, and that little butterfly didn't quite make the cut. I just wanted to keep it really simple. So I'm adding a little bit of Tombow on the base, and I'm going to add just fun foam here to lift my panel at the front. I find that when you add dimension to your cards, it just gives them a really nice regal look. I'm going to fold that over, and I'm going to pop my panel right on top. But before I do that, I'm going to add my little gold thread, and I'm just going to wrap it around the front 3 times. So I'm going to start here on the one side, and then I'm just going to wrap it around. And when I do this, I tend to cinch it on one side and then fan it out on the other. It just looks prettier, I think, because my bracket is going to be on that right hand side, so that's why I kind of group them all together. I'm going to add a little bit of tape on both ends. So I did put tape on the card base, and here I'm adding just a little bit of liquid glue, and I'm just putting tiny little dots. I just want to make sure that everything sticks down nice. So we're going to add that in, and because I did add those little glue dots, I was able to kind of move it around just to make sure that it was exactly where I wanted it. And then I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to take the kinks out of my gold thread, and I am going to wrap it around on the back side of that bracket. I just find that it's probably the easiest way to create your loops, and then to put them at the back, and then you can kind of fuss with them, and when you pop it down, everything is exactly where you want it. So I'm going to pop that right on the back side. I'm going to adjust them, because we all need to adjust our little loops, right? And then I'm going to pop that right on the card. So no card is complete without a couple of gold sequins, and I'm just using here micro dots. And just like that, we are done. What is that? 9 cards? They're all the same, but they all have their unique little look. So I really like the way these turns out. This one's going to be for that person I forgot to send a Christmas card. They're going to get a New Year's card. This one here, again, my favorite of all. That blend looks really, really nice. That little snowman is quite happy. And then we've got this really simple one done with the fancy borders. So I really hope you're enjoying these cards, because these stamp sets are not just for scrapbooking. You can use them for so much more. So here are the completed cards for the month of January and February. As always, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and if you'd like to see the stamp set used for scrapbooking, I've linked a video that you might like. Have yourself a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video.